Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we are talking about everyone's fucking favorite topic, which is growing your glutes. This is a topic that I love myself because the goal for me when getting into the gym was always to build the biggest, fattest, juiciest ass the world has ever seen. And not to toot my own horn, but I don't think I've done too bad. I've managed to get the BBL allegations, the filter allegations, even the steroid accusations too. Just starting it off with a little bit of a humble brag, but I know what I'm talking about. So I want to share all of my tips because for a very long time in my fitness journey, I was not seeing any progress whatsoever with my glutes. Like, they were just not fucking growing. I was showing up consistently. I thought I was doing everything right, but now I'm like 9 years into my journey. I can reflect and know all of the things that I was doing wrong back then. So I don't want you making those mistakes. One of the biggest things that I've changed has been my training intensity. Now, I know everyone talks about train to failure, train very, very close to failure, but I do feel like a lot of content misses the mark around this. And that is because training to failure is really a skill that you have to learn over time. So these are the things that have helped me actually train hard. Okay. Number one is you do have to actually train to failure. How do you know if you are training close enough to failure if you've never actually experienced what true failure is? For a long time in my journey, I trained all the way to failure when I was physically failing movements intentionally. Now, you do have to make sure that you're very smart with the exercises that you do this on, because some exercises, it's just not fucking safe to do that. Like, don't do this on RDLs or barbell back squats. The injury risk is too high. And what's going to happen if you're injured? You're going to be out of the gym. You're not going to be growing your glutes. So we don't want to do that. Do this on more machine-based exercises. That's going to really help you train hard and know what actual true failure feels like. Some other signs that you were training close enough to failure is going to be, one, your concentric speed involuntarily slows down. So the concentric portion of a rep is when your actual muscle is contracting to lift the weight. So for example, in a hip thrust, that's when you're literally like thrusting up the weight. That's the concentric portion. You want to make sure that that is slowing down towards the end of the set. And just because you get one slow rep does not mean that you're close enough to failure. I know from training to failure with myself that I get a lot of reps that are slow, grindy reps before I actually hit true failure. So when you're first met with that resistance of a rep, try your fucking hardest. Try with all you have left in you to complete those reps, because you will be surprised with how much more you can actually do. Another sign that you're training close enough to failure is going to be rep drop off. Probably seen content on social media that's like 3 sets of 10 is killing your gains, or 3 sets of 12 is killing your gains. And while that content means well, I don't think it actually provides you with the explanation of why that is. If you are lifting the same amount of weight for the same amount of reps on every single set, so for example, hip thrust, let's say you're doing 100 kilos, you get 10 reps on all of those sets. You are not training as hard as you could be, because when we're fatiguing a muscle, let's say in our first set, we train really fucking hard. Do you think that muscle is going to perform at its best in that next set? No, it is not. So we get something called a rep drop off. So maybe on the first set, you get 12 reps. On the second, you get 10. On the third, you get 8. They're dropping off, but that's involuntarily. It's not like, okay, I'm intentionally doing less reps. You just physically cannot do as many reps as you could at the start of the sets that you were doing, you know? One big thing that massively helped my training intensity, this was something that my first ever coach said to me. And he said to me, when you think you're done, do 5 more. And at the time I was like, what do you fucking mean? Like, I can't do 5 more. Like, it's not happening. It's not about if you can do 5 more or not. The last 5 reps of a set to failure are going to be the most like effective muscle growing reps. So let's say if you stop when your brain first says like, oh, you probably can't do any more, but you got 5 more when you told yourself 5 more, you would have missed out on those 5 reps. But maybe you get 2 more, maybe you get 3 more, maybe you get 1 more. You're still getting more reps than you would have if you had stopped when your brain first told you to stop. And if you get 0, that's fine. You know that you trained all the way to failure. But our brain is always going to want to tap out before the actual muscle, so we have to just like be at war with our brain and just push through that. But there are different types of training to failure as well. A lot of people think that when their grip gives out on an RDL or they get really out of breath, that's when they've hit failure. And yes, that means that your grip strength has failed or your cardiovascular fitness has fucking failed you, right? But the actual muscle, the glutes, which is what we want to get to failure, have not reached failure. So you do need to make sure that the glutes are actually what is the limiting factor in the movement. That is what has reached failure. And then into progressive overload, which again is something that everyone chats about, but again, I think a lot of content does miss the mark with this. Progressive overload is not necessarily something that we actively do. We're not thinking, we are kind of thinking I need to progress, but it is something that happens as a training adaptation. So we're able to do more reps or more weight because we have grown muscle. You want to think of it like this: your body can now do something that it couldn't do. So say last week you got 10 reps, next week you can do 11. Something has had to change and happen for that to happen. You've grown muscle, and that's why that has happened. Obviously there can be other reasons why that is happening. Form is the same, intensity is the same, all the variables are the same, but that has increased. It's a good sign that we're building muscle. But I do still go in with the mindset of trying to progress, just trying to progress. And this is why it's really important to logbook your sessions. So you can literally use a physical book, you can use your notes page on your phone, you can use an app, whatever it is, but track exactly how much weight, how many reps did you do. You want to treat it like a mini challenge with your past self. And that's how I approach it. So it's always like a little challenge of, can I beat last week Katie? So let's say I did 6 reps last week. Okay, I'm going to try and aim for 7. And then over time, I mean, it's not always going to happen. I'm not always going to be able to do more reps. When you've been training for a while, it does get a lot slower in terms of progression. Have that mindset going into a set of, okay, this is what I did last week. I'm going to beat that. And the way that I know if I need to increase the weight or increase the reps is I give myself a rep range for each set that I do. For example, let's say I've got a rep range of 5 to 9 reps. Let's say week 1, I get 5. Okay, I'm going to go up in reps. And then I try and go up in reps until I hit that top of the rep range. I get the 9. When I've got the 9, okay, next week I'm going to increase the load and I probably expect to get on the lower end of the rep range. That's why it's important to have a rep range and not just a rep target of 10. Give yourself that range, move through that range over time, and when you've hit the top, that's when you know it's time to increase in load. A lot of people will sabotage their progression because you're always in pursuit of the next best thing. I used to be convinced that I wasn't seeing the progress I wanted with my glutes because I wasn't following the perfect routine, the best routine. And whenever I saw someone with really fucking good glutes on Instagram, what would I do? I would drop my routine and I would follow theirs instead. It's really important that we're doing the same lifts every single week so we can actually progress at them. How is progressive overload going to happen if you're not actually doing the same lifts and getting stronger at them? And take this from me, I have done so many different glute routines over the years. Many different things work. There's not one perfect one. If you're always switching things up, if you're always in pursuit of this perfect one, you are going to be sabotaging your progress by not actually letting your program do the work. Progress really does come from sticking at the same exercises for weeks and weeks and months and months. And I only really switch them out if things start to stagnate or not feel good anymore. So for example, if I've had a few weeks where a specific exercise is just not feeling good, like I'm not getting a great stimulus in the glutes, I'm getting any pain, discomfort when doing it, I'll switch that one exercise out. But it doesn't mean that I completely revamp my routine. I will just sub exercises out when needs be. Technique is also very important, and not just in terms of avoiding injury. We actually want to make sure that we are biasing the glutes in our movements because we want the glutes, like I mentioned earlier, to be the limiting factor. So after a set, ask yourself, what was the reason I failed that movement? Was it my glutes? If it wasn't, if it was another muscle, okay, we need to do something with your form to change that, to ensure that the glutes are the limiting factor. And I thought it would be helpful if I went over 2 common exercises that I feel like people tend to not have their glutes be the limiting factor, which are RDLs and Bulgarian split squats. In an RDL, what you want to do is you want to push your glutes all the way back. We're really focused on stretching out the glutes. So the cue I have for this is top of the glutes to the top of the wall behind you. You also want to make sure that the torso follows the movement. So if we have our torso like very upright and we're pushing the hips back, we create this curve in our spine, which is going to place a lot of tension on the spinal erectors. And we don't want to be finishing the set thinking, oh shit, I had to finish that because my back was just about to snap. Do you know what I mean? Like, we want the glutes to be the actual limiter. Have the torso follow the movement. I also have a slight bend in the knee. This is to disadvantage the hamstring. So the straighter the legs are, the more hamstring you're going to get. If you bend the knee slightly, you're going to get less hamstring and therefore more tension on the glutes. I keep the dumbbells or barbell very close to my body. Further the dumbbells or barbell or whatever weight you're using drifts from your actual midline of your body, the more back you're going to feel. So make sure that these are nice and tight to your legs. I like to have the cue of, imagine the bar is painted white. We want to have a line down your legs of that paint with no breaks in it. And bracing is another big thing. And this used to confuse the fucking hell out of me because everyone says like brace breath in, brace breath in. And I just be like sucking in. That's not what we want to do. This is what I like to think about. You want to think about, if I was to come and punch you in the stomach, what would you do with your core? You tense up, wouldn't you? That's what we want to maintain when we're bracing. And I can find it very helpful to actually have a belt on when doing this because you have something to brace against. So if you are new to bracing, get a belt. It's easier when you have something to actually brace your stomach against. And then when you've got that tight position, like someone's going to punch you in the stomach, then that's when you want to think about brace breath in. And I'm not thinking sucking in, I'm thinking actually expanding my core as I'm breathing in. And you want to maintain that throughout the entirety of the rep. And then when you come up up to the top, that's when, if you need to, you can re-brace again and then go into the movement. But that's the way that I brace, and that's how I found it very, very helpful for me. And I don't get any lower back pain when I do this exercise. It is worth knowing you're always going to feel it in some extent in your back, in your hamstrings. Those muscles are always going to be worked in the movement, but we do want the glutes to be the actual limiting factor and not your back, not your hamstrings. Then Bulgarian split squats. This can be very quaddy if you are doing it for quads. So if you're doing it for quads, you're going to be focusing on going straight up and down and initiating the movement by driving the knee forwards to create a lot of knee flexion. What we want is we want hip flexion. So instead of thinking straight up and down, we want to think about a diagonal line back, where we're initiating the movement by pushing the glutes back, and we're going more like this as opposed to like this. And that cue I have found incredibly helpful for the glute. Now into exercise order. Again, something I used to massively overthink about, thinking, what's the order of exercises that all these girls with the big fat juicy asses are doing? Let me tell you, as someone that has a little bit of a fat juicy ass, it doesn't really matter too much, okay? Like I said, I've done many different glute routines over time. Many different things work. What's going to matter the most is doing something that you can consistently do week to week. In terms of my programming, I literally do exercises that I know I can get on at a certain time, because I train at the same time every single day, and I know, okay, this machine is usually free at this time. I work my routine around what is actually available, because it's important that you do stick to the same structure each week. So let's say if you have RDLs usually and then Bulgarian split squats, and then the next week you switch those round, because those movements both work your glutes, you're probably not going to be as strong in one or the other depending on the order that you do it, because you've fatigued the glutes, and therefore it's hard to measure progressive overload over time. So that's why I think it's important to stick to the same structure in terms of actually monitoring progressive overload over time. If you do need to switch up exercise order for equipment availability, etc., try and pick exercises that don't actually interfere with each other. So for example, a leg extension and an RDL, they're not going to interfere with each other because they're working different muscles. But that's the way that you want to approach it, like trying not to switch exercises in terms of ones that are going to interfere with each other. But if you do want a structure to follow in terms of how to set up a glute routine, this is what I tend to program for clients and what I recommend to most people. Start with a thrust or glute bridge variation, then go into a squat or lunge variation, then a hinge or deadlift variation, then an abduction or a cable isolation movement. That's a simple structure that you can follow. Okay, now into rep ranges. What rep range should you do? And it's not something that matters as much as you think. You can build muscle with any rep range from 5 to 30 reps equally. The caveat is that you have to be training at least close to failure. You have to be doing it with the same level of intensity. I do think that certain exercises lend better to different rep ranges. So for example, if you said, Katie, you're doing a set of 30 on Bulgarian split squats, I would be deceased. I would be 10 feet under in the ground. Like, there's no way I'm doing that. My cardiovascular system would be fucked. I would be fried. It would not be a nice experience. So that tends to lend better to a lower rep range. And similarly, if cable kickbacks were done with a heavy weight in a lower rep range set, then my standing leg is probably going to be struggling in terms of stability, and I'm not actually going to be training the working leg as hard as I need to. So it is exercise dependent, and I tend to program like compound exercises in slightly lower rep ranges and isolation movements in slightly higher rep ranges, just to account for that. But again, it doesn't really matter too much. Pick what you enjoy. If you like higher rep ranges, you can go for it. If you just love the lower rep ranges, you can go for that as well. What matters most is obviously making sure that you're training with enough intensity. Okay, so now into volume and frequency. So how many days a week should you be training your glutes? You will hear people say 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 4 days a week, whatever it is. What matters most is what you can consistently do. I have trained my glutes 3 times a week at some points. I've trained it 2 times a week, and I've still seen results with both. What really matters is what you can be consistent with. So if you are thinking, do you know what? I would love to train glutes 3 times a week, but I just know it's not going to be realistic for me. 2 days a week is probably best. On the other hand, if you are training glutes 2 times a week, but you're finding that, okay, towards the end of that workout, I'm feeling really fried, I really can't give it much intensity, it could be better to split your volume throughout 3 sessions as opposed to the 2 sessions. And how much volume should you be doing? I hear you ask me. Recommendations for volume are around 10 to 20 working sets for your glutes per week. Now, I want to be clear as well, because this used to confuse me a hell of a lot. There is no one perfect amount of volume. Volume is more like a spectrum. You can see results with different amounts of volume. What really matters is, are you recovering from the work that you're doing? So signs that you're not recovering is that 1, you're not progressing in your lifts, or you're in fact regressing. 2, you're getting overlapping soreness. So let's say you're training Monday, you train again Wednesday, still sore when you come to train that. Okay, it could be worth lowering the volume in that session a little bit. But you really do want to think of it as a spectrum of volume that's going to work, as opposed to, oh, I'm doing 16 sets. Is that going to be enough? Oh no, is 12 sets too little? it really is a spectrum. If you're recovering, you're actually progressing, you're getting stronger over time, you know, you're seeing progressive overload happen, you're in a good spot when it comes to volume. And yeah, sure, you could do more, you can trial it out, see if you can recover from more. If you can, perfect. But if you're finding you're getting that overlapping soreness, not progressing in your lifts, okay, maybe it's time to scale things back down. Okay, now into nutrition. So my nutrition used to have no structure. I would try and eat high protein, but in my opinion, it's not enough to just try and eat high protein. I do think that tracking your macros is going to be a way to see the best results. So the structure I have to help me actually hit my macros, and if you don't know what macros you should be eating, you can easily find it online on a macro calculator. The structure I use to help me hit my protein, which is something that I don't know if I've come up with, it's what I teach my clients anyway, is I eat 4 meals a day, 4 protein-based meals a day. None of this 3 meal a day bullshit. I think it's too hard to hit your protein if you're doing it in 3 meals. 4 meals a day. One of those meals can be more of a snack-based meal, but in every single one of those meals, I try and get 25 grams of protein coming from a direct protein source. So this is going to be a complete direct protein source, things like chicken breast, 0% fat Greek yogurt, lean beef, tofu, egg, those types of protein. And I'm trying to get 25 grams coming directly from that protein source because we want to be eating enough protein that we meet a certain leucine threshold. Now, leucine is one of the essential amino acids that we need to build muscle. And we want to hit enough of it because that actually spikes something called muscle protein synthesis. So if we're getting in enough protein per meal to spike muscle protein synthesis 4 times a day, we're golden. And I mean, you can eat more meals than that, like that is absolutely fine, but I personally find 4 is easiest to be consistent with, especially if you're someone that has a fucking job, right? You know, you can't just be eating at all times of the day, you know, like some fitness influencers that all they do is just go to the gym. And then it is about being smart with your nutrition before your workout as well. Always make sure that I have plenty of carbohydrates before a session to ensure that I'm actually fueled properly. If you want to push yourself, if you really want to train hard, you have to make sure that your body has enough fuel to be able to do that. Don't be spending all of your time in a calorie deficit. And with glute growth, it's not going to be ideal to be in a deficit year round. And while you can definitely build muscle mass in a deficit, especially if you're new to training, you're not going to get the amount of growth that you are capable of. It is important to spend time at maintenance or a slight surplus to really see the growth that you want. And you don't need to be in a fucking massive surplus. Like, I've done that before. Let me tell you, just meant that I gained unnecessary fat gain and I didn't feel too great about myself. So yeah, around about a 200 calorie surplus is really, I think, all you need. And glute growth, it does take time. It really does take time. I know it's frustrating. It really does test your delayed gratification. You have to start to fall in love with the actual process of building muscle. And that's why I love things like tracking progressive overload, because every day in the gym, it feels like a mini competition. Like, oh yeah, like I've got a little achievement of doing a little bit more weight. It's focusing on those things, and those things over time, what's going to get you the results that you want. And you just have to be patient. But stop obsessing over these small intricacies of, oh, how much volume or what's the perfect split. Focus on doing the fundamentals for a very, 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 very long time, and you will see great results. But I hope this video was helpful. And if you want to see more content like this, feel free to subscribe because I love making videos like this. And if you did like it, like would be much appreciated. Anyway, I will leave it there and I will catch you in next week's video. Bye.